Now, the first time I became aware of you was when people tried to stop you at American University. And the first time I really engaged was when they tried to burn the university to stop me from speaking. And the reason I went to Perth to introduce your show was when the Premier there said you couldn't come.
Right.
And I thought, well, stuff you.
Right.
How important have the people protesting against you been in creating you?
Important. I don't think it's any secret that I have used the left's fondness for protest and for shouting down and ultimately for violence as proof of concept, if you like. It's sort of like, there they are outside proving my point for me. I don't think they've been essential to my success, but they've been a lovely illustration of what I mean. Every time I give a talk, every time I appear in a parliament, every time I'm invited to give anything with any remote hint of prestige about it or big audience or whatever, there's a ready-made example for me on the street outside, you know, raven-haired, unshaven, unwashed, furious, with badly spelled signs, out there demonstrating everything that I'm saying.
One of the things about this tour that really got my goat was that the New South Wales Police asked for $80,000 to protect you from the people trying to create mayhem. In Victoria, it was more than $40,000. How can it be that police are asking you to pay them to protect you from ferals?
To be protected from the... Well, it goes worse. If you look like a level deeper, it's worse. Because this is the state asking conservatives and libertarians to pay for the consequences of what the state itself is creating and encouraging elsewhere in the education sector. So you've got government institutions, you know, breeding this sort of leftist, violent, you know, toys out of the stroller, completely incapable of dealing with reality, sort of, you know, loon, out there on the street, being violent, creating disturbances, blocking traffic, preventing the, you know, the flow of law-abiding citizens wanting to go in, hear a stand-up comic, wanting to go in, hear a political commentator, right? But the state's creating and encouraging this stuff by allowing total political, you know, homogeneity in higher education, and then turning around and charging the victims for the, you know, for policing it. This is what conservatives mean. This is what they're talking about when they say that the state is constantly getting bigger and drifting leftwards, and that conservatives and libertarians, perhaps for the first time this decade, are now the recipients of censorship and oppression of their free speech rights. I think it's unarguable at this point.
What is it that you wanted to achieve with this tour?
Well, Australia is my second biggest market by readership and viewership and all the rest of it, and people have been begging me to come down for a couple of years now, actually. So I want to come down, do the show, investigate Australia for myself, see how bad the situation was down here. I discovered that it's not as bad as it is in Europe. It's not as bad as it is in America, but you have all of the necessary conditions here percolating up. You know, you've got your rabid far-left feminist enabled by mainstream media. You've got your sort of soft-left mainstream news anchors who always kind of, you know, side with that side of things, you know, just sort of gently and subtly nudging society and civilization, always ratcheting leftwards, you know, on every major issue. All the conditions are here in Australia for you to go the same way as America and to get drawn into these bitter, miserable culture wars where the sexes and the races and everybody else is driven apart by the progressive left. I'd quite like to save you from that if I can, or at least contribute to the great work that people like you are doing, and head that off. Because Australia, it seems to me, is a country with too much common sense and too good a sense of humour to allow the scolds and the censors and the nannies to show up and run everything.
What really struck me was while I was on the tour, I moonlighted and did a couple of Liberal Party events. The energy there compared to the energy at your things was really quite extraordinary. People really supercharged about free speech, about no to identity politics, against big government. I also asked at both venues, I just said Malcolm Turnbull.
I knew you were going to say that.
The booing, and then I said Tony Abbott, and it was not quite as loud, but cheering.
Yeah.
What did you take out of that?
Demonstration, proof positive, if proof were needed, that politicians aren't speaking about things that anyone under 45 cares about. You know, there is nothing being discussed in parliaments or on the campaign trail or in many cases on news shows. I mean, you know, it's a credit to you that you talk about this kind of stuff, because many, you know, popular anchors in the US don't, or are, you know, fully in the tank for feminism and political correctness and all the rest of it. When they do mention it, it's activism, not journalism. You discuss this stuff on your show, which I like. But, you know, the things that young people really care about are not particularly political. They're cultural and they're social. People care about race, sex, love, death, money, really big, important issues that they used to look to pop stars to help them get through. Now our pop stars are so insipid and vapid and boring and have nothing to say. I mean, the era of Madonna and Michael Jackson is long gone. You know, the pop stars today have nothing to say. Politicians have nothing to say. Nobody in culture is really speaking to anyone under 45 about any of the stuff that they really care about, unless they're on the left, in which case they have a vast army of journalists, professors, news anchors, all, you know, merrily reinforcing their point of view and painting the world in a particular, quite far left direction. But if you're young, if you're, let's say, 30, 33, my age, or 23, or 13, which is where my, you know, fan base begins, and you're a centre or a centre-right kind of person, you want to watch a news show with current affairs, you want to go to a gig, you want to buy a ticket to go and have a good evening out, you want to read a book, where do you go? What do you read? Who do you enjoy? Like, what are you fans of? It's very difficult to identify in culture really anything that is geared up for people who are on the side of free expression and free speech in mainstream culture. And I think what happened with, you know, the energy levels, the difference, I think, is a result of the fact that I just try to talk to people about what they actually care about. And it's what I care about too, because I myself fall within that bracket of under 45s who are left utterly cold by popular culture and by politics today.
But as you know, look, I'm 3 decades older than you, and so I go to your show, and as I know, we had this argument on stage. Mm-hmm. Then I see you put up a thing of Clementine Ford, mm-hmm. one of our critics here on Twitter, and you've got uneffable. I found that crude and rude and nasty, and I didn't want to be associated with it. Mm-hmm.
Well, you said that at the time. I think that, you know, if you think about what the left has been engaged in for the last 30 years, they destroy people's reputations. They name call. They are crass and crude and rude and in some cases violent. They do it for a living. And, you know, I call people names because sometimes it's funny, sometimes I just enjoy it, and other times to make a point, which is, you know, the left, this sort of feral, aggressive left, I think can cope with a bit of teasing and a bit of name-calling and a bit of waspishness from one gay guy, when for 30 years they haven't just been name-calling conservatives, they've been throwing out allegations. It's quite a different thing from calling somebody fat or dropping the N-word or whatever. When you do stuff like that, you're the person who looks bad, not them, right? What the left does is call people racist and sexist and homophobe and Islamophobe, whatever. Those aren't names. Those are allegations. They are condemnations. They are assessments of moral character, and they require a response.
Well, she's called you things that sound like Nazi, neo-Nazi.
What would you rather be called, fat or a neo-Nazi? You get called fat, the guy who called you fat looks bad. You get called a neo-Nazi, all eyes are on you, and they say, why are you being called a neo-Nazi? What have you ever done? Is there any justification for this? It can destroy people's lives, and it does destroy people's lives.
What about calling Jessica Rowe of Channel 10, putting up a photo of her and the male model that looks much physically quite similar, and then saying that's her original sex?
Well, it wasn't a male model, it was her. She's the one. She's the one putting herself through gender-bending photo shoots precisely for political reasons, by the way, doing all this kind of like gender-queer, gender-bending, trans, whatever. There we go, see? It wasn't a photo of a man who looked like her, it was her. She did it, not me. I just made a joke about...
You should have known at the time. I actually,
you were probably really mad with me, weren't you? But
well, I was. Do you know what? I'll tell you something. I was listening to some of this, and I went off stage, and I rang my wife, asking her, should I go back on for the Q&A and be associated with it, or should I challenge him on stage? Mm-hmm. My wife is smart. I wouldn't challenge her on stage.
Did the right thing.
Yeah, I should have known that. I wish you'd told me earlier. I wouldn't have freaked so much. But there was another comment that, again, I didn't like the Clementine Ford thing. I just think it cheapens your act, to be honest. And it's bullying, but another one that really got me was where you said Muslim immigrants were skilled at one thing, and that was raping women.
I think I said many things. I think I said raping women, planning terrorist attacks, signing up for welfare. It's a joke. It's a joke. And, you know, you look at the behaviour of
I didn't like it.
But that's
I wasn't
okay.
laughing.
You're entitled not to laugh, but the audience did.
Yeah, I know, that, but that's where I see. That's where you see, I understand some of the points you're making.
You're not my audience, okay? You are going to want a far higher level of erudite discourse from your political commentators than people who are 22 years old. 22-year-olds don't want the po-faced, you know, proper, serious, whatever. You know, I love how you dress, but 22-year-olds aren't interested in pocket squares and politeness and getting bleeped.
That's the station's fashion guru.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely, and I appreciate it because I'm from,
Nadia, it's your fault now.
Because I'm from England, and of course I love nice dressing, and I'm a Savile or whatever. But 22, it's a different universe.
I got that. Look, that's where it's confused. I went to your audience. The energy was there.
Think of it this way, right? These are people who have been told, you know, who have heard feminists say things like, "Kill all white men." Masculinity is so fragile. I bathe in male tears. That's not just fringe feminists. That is mainstream political discourse today. That is how men are spoken about by women on television, in The Guardian, in other newspapers, right? That is how men, that is how the straight white men of social justice folklore are routinely described and spoken about. And that has been the case for 30 years. What I am trying to do is show the left, it's not nice, is it?
Well, look, I got that. And there was another bit where you said a certain Hollywood star, then I'm not going to be unfair and name him, but the star of Wolverine was gay. And I thought, oh, I don't like that either. And then I remembered, I went to a Barry Humphries show down here in Melbourne, and he was making jokes about Ian Thorpe being gay before Ian Thorpe had come out.
Yeah.
I didn't like it then either. And I thought, well, how can Barry Humphries get away with it, but you're pilloried?
Very simple. Politics. I'm a conservative, so people aren't used to giving free passes for things, right? If you're left-wing, if you're seen only as a comedian, if you're seen only as an artist, if you're seen only as a musical act, you can say anything. You can do
Is that
anything.
why you're more gay on stage than you are behind?
Of course. You can get away with murder. Now, I have a stage persona. I have an act, which is me. It is me, maybe just sort of ratcheted up slightly, right? But not too much. You know, I have a stage persona, which I like to toy with. You know, it is me kind of like slightly amplified, slightly, you know, more theatrical. But the point of it is to demonstrate, first of all, the double standards that exist in public life, that exist everywhere.
You've done that.
Well, I am doing it, you know,
No, well,
because my youngest fans are 13, and they're new to this world, and they don't learn from broadsheet newspapers or Alan Bloom books or from reading, you know, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. They learn from me.
That's a good book, actually.
It's
a good series of books.
We can talk about that another time. You know, it's a question of 13-year-olds. Do you want to throw them to the wolves and allow nasty, mean, sadistic, vindictive, sociopathic, feminist harpies to get their teeth into them for 20 years before you even realize they exist? Or do you want someone like me, who you might think a little crass, a little gauche, a little rude, whatever, teaching them about freedom of speech, teaching them about capitalism, property rights? You know, I'm a ferociously pro-life, for instance, which people are always surprised by, and I talk to people as young as 13 about that kind of stuff. Don't you want someone out there doing that in the language that people that age understand, in the way in which they communicate? I completely accept it. Some people find my act, you know, a little on the nose, a little bit crass, all the rest of it, but there's one of me. There is not just an army, but an industry on the other side.
And like I say, look, I was there and I saw it. I saw the reaction, and I saw you reaching people that the Liberals can't. And in fact, these were people that are in revolt against the Liberals as are today, when they should be, as libertarians, natural in the next generation. I understand that.
I only hope at bringing them back into the fold.
So the only problem is, while look, I don't want to sell you short. In your presentations, you also talk about the sort of the wider things that you've mentioned here. But I did leave asking, like, you win in one sense, you get the bigger audience, but do we win when you're as crude as the left are? Do we actually win then?
Well, I think if you watch the way that I am in shows, I will modulate between quite elevated language, an aspirational language about values, and, you know, jokes about my sexual partners, and jokes about, you know, how, you know, feminists end up feminists because of something about them, not something about the rest of us, and they want all of us to be as miserable as they are because they've grown up single, and my usual routine. But what I'm trying to do is illustrate hypocrisy, is have some fun, and conservatives have tried for 30 years to only have discussions in elevated terms. They have, you know, National Review, Commentary magazine, these very earnest, upright, serious publications in the US have achieved precisely nothing in the culture wars. I might not be to your taste, and that's okay. Don't send your kids to my shows. But I am to plenty of people's taste. And what they leave with at the end of those shows isn't, ooh, he's so rude and he tells fat jokes. What they leave with at the end of that show is, I never even considered that. I blow open the fire doors in a way that some people find crass, but everybody has to kind of pay a little bit of attention to. And I leave people at the end of those shows feeling educated, entertained, and challenged. And if everybody, you know, walks out of that room with a smile on their face, having learned something new, and with a you know, bee in their bonnet saying, I must go look that up, I want to know if he's right about that, then I've done my job properly. And I don't want everyone to be like me. I think the world would be ghastly if it was full of Milo Yiannopoulos, but I think it is really important that there are some people like me. And I am nothing compared to the excesses of the left. If you think I'm crass and rude and mean and unnecessarily crude,
I totally agree with you.
I am 5% of what private citizens are subjected to on the basis of nothing from the organized left, whether it's Justine Sacco, who made a joke and then landed in Africa and found her career destroyed and her hotel reservation, all the rest of it, by Gorka. These people don't, as I do, punch level or punch up, right? They punch down at private citizens, and I'm the defender of those private citizens, and I will take the slings and arrows and be just as rude back to the people who are being rude to them, because these people need defending, because they don't have...
We will make America great again.